Hey everyone, it's Alice here at the FlyQuest LoL YouTube channel for patch 1520. This is the world's patch, although not much has actually changed from what I said on Twitter about most of the changes, so we're gonna go through them really quick. One of the bigger highlights of this patch is the streamer mode improvements. This does not basically allow you to get griefed as easily as you do get completely hidden, and I guess even against the API type things that some people were using to get around the hidden champion or player IDs that end up happening as soon as you're in the lobby. Banning allied hovers in NA and OCE. This doesn't necessarily mean that it'll actually go to every single server, because there are certain things that are server specific. For instance, obviously Korea never got the ability to duo above masters, and because it's MMR locked, it doesn't actually even typically allow you to duo into masters. It'll actually stop you typically around D1 or something. There's also other server specific things that I think exist in China, and some other servers that just no other servers really have, and so we'll see actually how this ends up going. Banning allied hovers, NA and OCE only. The other thing that you can do about this in theory is I do wonder what happens in the event that people just start grief hovering in order to do things that way. I don't know how Riot would work around that. Really, champion select reports need to actually carry a little bit more weight, but it's fine because the evolution of bans and stuff is apparently very close on the horizon. Anivia. So the really big change for Anivia is getting 1 second off at all ranks is massive because she doesn't build a ton of ability haste. And for support Anivia, which builds the tank variant and just runs around and uses W and R and just is a total stun bot with Q, and then uses R for the slows and whatnot, and plays fully tank. That is a absolutely massive change for the Anivia. And then the Frostbite, you get 5 extra damage. This doesn't really do anything because you calculate the number of Frostbites that you cast inside of a laning phase, and you multiply it by X, where X is the damage increase, and then you subtract that from the damage reduction that the opponents end up having, and you get a final answer, which is Anivia is going to get like half an auto to a little bit more than that inside of lane. The Azir change is interesting in that he is going to have now a stronger mid game, but his early game impression is going to be a little bit lower, which I don't even think it's actually really that severe, but some matchups will obviously be helped by this, and so nice little changes here for him to make him more of a mid and late game champion, and then everything will just be better for him from that point. So, Briar gets 2 seconds shaved off. Despite her lack of controls, Briar's been tearing up one of the highest performing junglers at lower ranks for a bit now, so again, it's a lower MMR skewed change, but totally fine. The Camille change, she's going to lose half an auto attack, maybe a little bit more inside of laning phase for the armor growth, and then maybe later on she's going to end up losing maybe like half a ruby or something at ultra late game, probably a little bit less than half a ruby in terms of value. Tactical sweep going up by a little bit doesn't really matter because again, this isn't her key ability, and so it's not the end of the world if it ends up getting some sort of a buff. 2 seconds shaved off at rank 1, though, is quite nice, and just getting the extra 10 flat damage is definitely good. The Fizz change, Stone Trident, so all of Fizz's base damages are being increased for early and mid-game transitions, which is Fizz's weakest point. So it is very frightening. I actually could even maybe see these changes getting reverted. We'll end up seeing what happens to Fizz on the ladder. These are one of the really scary changes, where Fizz's base damages being increased when Fizz is a jouster and Fizz is a champion that really just wants to, I don't even really know. Fizz getting all the base damages increased this much, the on-hit, the passive damage over time, the Charm of the Waters, even at rank 1, even if it's Guppy or if it's Chomper or something like that. Well, if it's Chomper, it's actually going to end up being nerfed. So if you land Guppy, then, which is the close range all-in, which is typically what most Fizzes actually do go for inside of laning phase, then it's going to end up being buffed. The Gigalodon at the later stages of the game is buffed in the event that you don't have a whole lot of AP, so typically like first reset or something like that. Fizz is just outright going to be much stronger in the early and mid game, and so very scary changes. Riot obviously has to be cautious with a champion like Fizz. Moving on to Graves, Riot has basically decided that lethality Graves is a little bit too strong or something inside of the jungle, so they're doing changes that ultimately end up benefiting Bruiser and utility Graves, where it's going to end up having more base damage, but if you end up having a lot of AD, then you're not getting as much value. So if you're doing things with like Phantom Dancer, or you're doing things like Black Cleaver and like these types of things, etc., then you're going to be okay. But in the event that you're building just pure lethality and stuff, you are losing quite a lot of bonus AD, even though the base damage is going up. So it's You know, I mean, the base damage is going up by, what, 60, and then, I mean, that's the combined damage, right? It's going up by 60, but you're losing 40% total bonus AD. So, again, depends on what kind of a build you're doing. Katarina. Armor is going to go up by 4, so in early laning phase, this is going to end up equaling like half an auto attack, and then in the later stages of the game, once she has a lot of HP and whatnot, this probably ends up equating to something like half a ruby crystal is the way to look at this change. Okay. So, Malphite. Base armor goes up by 3. E ground slam goes up by a flat 10, which is actually really big for Malphite jungle. Because he casts E twice per camp, so he gets a free extra 20 damage. So I don't know how much that actually speeds up his clear. It's definitely going to speed it up on blue and Gromp and red, where he's going to actually cast this probably 3 times, and definitely more on red and blue, depending on what stage of the game he's actually at. Obviously, one of the spellbook users, this is also good for Malphite support. In terms of Malphite mid and Malphite top lane, I don't know how much this actually changes anything, because I don't think it affects his wave clear there at all. The base armor going up by a flat 3 is okay. Again, it's a negligible amount of increased EHP in the early game. Orianna. So this change is odd. At higher skill levels, Orianna's wave clear is far too safe, and her optimized builds make her too tanky for her to be exposed to any real risk. So we're looking to reintroduce some risk to her role kit. We want to incentivize Orianna to build some damage and less tank. So we're weakening her early wave clear power spike, so she has to pick up more AP to clear waves, something most players are already doing and thus shouldn't be impacted much by. So this doesn't end up equaling a buff until you exceed 400 AP. However, it is actually a buff early game, because if you just keep the W at rank 1 and you get the extra 10% AP, in which case you're maxing, you know, Q first, etc. For the very first stage of the game, and the very first recall, and typically the second recall, this is always just going to be a buff. It's an extremely minor buff. If you end up hitting someone with, you know, 4 Ws or 5 Ws or something like that, you're probably going to be seeing an extra 15 to 20 damage inside of lane than you would have otherwise had. So that's actually kind of funny, because it's like half an auto worth of value, but that is literally it. So really funny. And then obviously mid-game is going to end up being nerfed, and then the ultra late game is going to get a buff. Pantheon, so he's ending up being changed to get back some of his clear speed. I still think that everything that me and Inspire said about this champion when we were doing the jungle tier list on Twitter not too long ago, and we talked about where Pantheon was placed. Obviously, Inspire, not a very big fan of him, thinks that the pick ban stuff is basically kind of fake news in a way. It's like one of those collectively bizarre things that sometimes happens with certain champions. He's getting his clear speeds back, but he's still just going to be Pantheon. He's massive utility bodies, like the Jhin of the jungle. In most cases, but obviously for lane and support Pantheon, this does not really affect him. Veigar, no matter how you want to look at it, it's just a buff. You know, even in the early stages of the game, it's just going to be doing an extra 10 damage. And then in the later stages of the game, this will probably end up adding a couple hundred extra damage to his team fighting later on. So that's the way to look at the Veigar change for the Dark Matter. It's just a nice buff that he ends up getting. So it helps every single Veigar. Volibear, passive, the Relentless Storm is going to go down by 5%. AP ratio on Sky Splitter is going to go down by 10%. So a very negligible amount. Sky Splitter, now, you know, if you're opening D-Ring or something like that, it's going to be missing 1.8 damage. Huge. From the Sky Splitter. This slows down... I don't even really know what exactly it slows down. I don't think this affects anything inside of his jungle. It affects the Cosmic Drive build. It affects the Roa Cosmic Drive Navari build, I guess, a little bit. But even that build, you're not seeing, you know, obscene amounts of AP. So Sky Splitter is going to be missing anywhere from 15 to 20 extra damage. You're only going to be casting it once, you know, and then it's going to go through resist. It's a very fake nerf in most cases. Passive, the Relentless Storm, losing 5% AP on it. You know, 5% AP, he's going to be missing a super negligible amount of damage, maybe an entire extended trade or something. Volibear is going to be missing somewhere like 60 to 70 damage, and that's late game. And that's, again, assuming that he has that build itemization that I just mentioned. Warwick, so attack damage growth, he's going to be missing 0.25 per level. So every 4 levels, he's going to be missing 1 AD. So Warwick's going to be missing almost, you know, half a longsword in terms of AD when he's level 18. The attack speed growth going down by 0.3. What this ends up meaning is that Warwick's probably going to be missing about 1 auto attack in a very extended trade. That's the way to look at it. Okay. Wukong, Crushing Blow, doesn't really matter, 5% bonus AD. Wukong builds Trinity Force, and then he builds Black Cleaver. Sometimes he builds Thundered Sky, etc. He doesn't get in crazy amounts of bonus AD anyway. Full Lethality Wukong, I guess, would obviously be a different story, because after those, two previous items that I just mentioned, he typically ends up starting to go a little bit bruisery. W Warrior Trickster, clone damage, kind of fake, whatever. Cooldown, going up by a flat 2 seconds, not the end of the world. This doesn't really do anything. And then Nimbus Strike ends up losing 40 base later on. That one is definitely a little bit more noticeable, and I guess when you combine it with the Crushing Blow, someone's basically getting half a ruby. It would probably be the way to end up looking at it, or maybe just under a ruby on an assassination attempt. Systems Lane Swap Detection is now going to go increase until 4 minutes. This mechanic only affects support champions venturing to the far side of the map. This won't affect your level 1 Aurelian Soul Roams unless you're playing a Soul Support True. And that is it for the changes. And then obviously there's a lot of other quality of life stuff. We have the really cool skins that come in. Flora Fatalis Fiddlesticks obviously looks absolutely amazing. Lysandra Soraka looks really good, and now finally Trials of Twilight Xinjiao is out. And this is what some of them look like inside of the This is what some of them look like inside of the game. For Fiddlesticks, it's obviously going to impact how his visuals are. I mean, this Soraka skin looks absolutely... I mean, she looks like something out of Willy Wonka, like the horror Willy Wonka type thing. And then the Lysandra skin also looks absolutely exquisite. So the chromas here, I think, are doing very, very, very well. She really, this chroma, this skin line reminds me of that city in Pokemon Sword and Shield. It's like Balel or like Balael or something. Its name is not coming to me. In terms of competitive impact and whatnot in this patch, the only thing I think that could actually be a thing is Anivia. The Anivia change is massive, but don't expect Anivia to actually get picked, even though she's good in 4 roles. Well, really only 3: support, mid, and top. But 80 definitely could be played. And then you have things like Fizz, but I'm not so sure how many people would actually pick up Fizz come Worlds. Graves doesn't affect competitive. Katarina doesn't affect competitive. Azir kind of fake for competitive in the sense that he's going to get out of the laning phase anyways. Mid-game's going to be whatever. Veigar has been picked a little bit. Doesn't really matter. Volibear solo queue. Warwick solo queue. Wukong still going to be picked along with certain champions, and so it's not enough of a nerf to prevent that from happening. And then the Orianna is, funnily enough, kind of like a buff in most cases. And then the later stages of the game, landing like 2 dissonances, you're going to be missing a very negligible amount of damage, so I don't think the Oriannas, which are being picked for utility and other combos and stuff, are really going to care that much about it. So that is it for the changes. Now, obviously, with the next patch on the horizon, we can hopefully start seeing some real changes come to light, and that would be very nice because things have been boring for a while now.